Hello, and welcome to Hour of History, Philadelphia's #1 podcast. No, I don't have the data to prove that, but it is a fantastic podcast, and it is one of Philadelphia's best, unbiasedly one of the best in Philadelphia. Probably the best. I don't know. I don't even know what I'm saying. This week, we have an excellent podcast where I talk to one of my colleagues and friends, Andrea Siotto. Typically on an average day, Monday, Wednesday, or Friday, when we both teach, we have office hours at the same time. And if there's no students coming up, we will sit and have similar discussions for hours. So it's like you get to sit in on our office hours today. We have a great conversation, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. As usual, today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook, download, and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/hour of history. They have hundreds of thousands of titles to choose from and some really excellent works. Like, for example, right now I'm listening to Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness because that's going to be some required reading in the fall for one of my courses. So once again, thanks for joining us on Hour of History. Enjoy the show. It's a real cracker.
This is the Hour of History podcast. Our world, anytime, anyplace. And now from the Hour of History studio in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, your Hour of History starts right now.
Hello and welcome to Hour of History. I'm your host, Stephen Bauman, and this week we are in Hour of History headquarters in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And I've got a special guest with me to talk about a lot of things under the sun, but specifically what it takes to be a historian and sort of how we go about our work in the archives. That's what I'm interested because my friend Andrea Siotto,
hello,
is just back fresh off a trip to England. Yes.
Fresh in the middle of the summer.
I heard it was really nice over there, actually.
Yeah, I mean, for most of the time I didn't have the heat streak, the like there in London.
Yeah.
So I didn't enjoy it so much because for me summer is very hot and there was like kind of like chilly.
Oh, it was cold still.
Well, I mean, it was like mid-60s and I was like, my wife was here and saying, "Oh yeah, it's 8," and I was like, "No, I want to be there." But
yeah, and plus
fine.
You were in a dark archive.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like the classic idea of the archive in a basement because they renovated all the museum. They actually did a very good job about that. But at the same time, like they made this new, very cool. How do they call it? Research room.
Oh.
That is very nice, small, but like. Everything is new. The chairs are comfortable, so you're like, "Oh,
still had their tags on them."
Almost like everything. You could see that everything was unused, and I don't know. Even on that, like, I had some kind of troubles because if you went to many archives, I went to many archives in Italy, so old stuff, and. You understand that there was a design, even like old design, that was really refined for researcher, for studying in that place for a lot of hours.
Like there was they built it so you could sit there for a long time.
Yeah, and this one was comfortable, so it was not a problem. But for example, and probably this is like something that is good for documents, but all the tables were glass.
Oh.
And that, I don't know, that was not really the most comfortable thing.
Well, before we get too far into the archive, why don't you just give us a little background? Like, what were you studying? What archive were you at? Yeah, what are you up
to? I'm studying the interaction of soldiers and technology during the First World War. So specifically, I want to highlight how the soldiers in the trenches lobbied for the change in technology from the bottom. So a lot of time when you think about technologies, you think about like the big stuff like tanks. Mm-hmm. No, and you think
like teleporting.
Yeah, this kind
in
of
the case
stuff,
of like
Enterprise. Yeah, but and even like airplanes, like
horses.
big horses. Well, they used a lot of horses. They had like a lot of veterinarians. There were like hilarious documents that like I saw, but. All the position of the horses when you do it.
Right?
Yeah, that's technology. This is in that case it's an old technology that was well established because obviously when you had cavalry, you had like a veterinarian corps that like was following you all the time. But a lot of new things were actually the result of research on the ground, of practice more than research. And then the people that like find out those things on the ground were slowly lobbying the top to change stuff. So we usually think about a top-down technological advancement. The genius guy that invented tank and then goes to the government. The government puts a lot of money there, and then the tanks go there, and warfare changes.
Right.
And what I found out is that, well, it is not totally new in history of technology. It is like it's almost like an old stuff that technology needs a system of technology around it. Mm-hmm. The classical example, if you have the cell phone that you have now, but if you teleport in like 20 years before, that cell phone is a piece of metal. You can't do anything with it. And those systems comes out from an interaction of different actors. So you have how the public, like how the customers like react to the thing,
and how people use it.
How people use it, and how companies decide to charge you. So
well, it's like cameras were never a thing on phones for a long time, and now I think like
they're one of the main thing.
Yeah.
You have like the first thing is like 20 megapixel camera.
It's crazy.
Yeah, and it's like a telephone. It's like to talk. You have all this kind of stuff, but that's not something new. When you have complex system, you always have an interaction from top and bottom. But in the First World War, what came out was usually in the historical research was usually only the top part.
Oh, okay.
So I'm basically looking at how the bottom actually participated to this thing.
And so who has that information?
So most of the information comes from personal memories and diaries. So I'm lucky enough that there is like plenty of data online. So I don't have to go to 50 archives to take like personal memories because a lot of them, they are online. A lot of like oral interviews that the Imperial War Museum did in the 80s with like, 19 years old or 80 years old soldiers, veterans.
That's cool. I actually use those oral interviews too in the World War II research. Oh. They have like, that's some really good stuff.
At the Imperial
War Museum. Yeah. And they put it all online.
They put them all online, and it's like very awesome. And I use them for an article. So that's great. And a lot of diaries and personal memories went online because those are the...
Are those like 90% love letters?
Well, I skimmed those. The meaning that
you don't get lost in them?
So there are two different kinds of people, of soldiers in general that take memories. Mm-hmm. The one that write only about a topic, a single one, and could be food, weather, and love.
Just every time.
Every time, every day, because that's what they think. And if you think about it, that's what we think too. Oh, today is a crap day, and I'll put it on my diary, so it will be very important not for me, but for me as an historian, I don't care that's raining. I care about like your feeling in the trenches. What's your interaction with the trenches? And most of people don't write about that. a lot of like details that for us like seem obvious because we are living the life now. In 50 years will be something odd that people are actually researching and that actually nobody's writing about, you know?
Yeah. If people even write anymore.
Yeah. Let's say that I'm writing a blog.
Okay.
How many people write about their daily life and their personal experience with Netflix?
Yeah, no one.
No one. But like someone in 50 years old wants to understand how
what
streaming started and what do we think about the difference between TV and Netflix? How many people writes about that? Perhaps one in the United States, perhaps.
Yeah.
But that's the cool stuff because basically you are explaining your culture to someone that is not part of your culture. And people in the past are a different culture from what we are now. So it's like to explore a different country, but simply you are going back in time. The thing that I missed were not like diaries, but were the official documents. So how the top answered to this lobby. And that's where like I had to go to the archive and I went to the Imperial War Museum that has like the biggest collection of documents on the First World War. There are two big archives. One is the National Archives in London and the other is the Imperial War Museum. I didn't even went to the National Archives because they have a kind of document that usually I don't care for my research. More like bureaucratic stuff.
It's kind of amazing though to me that like, and I've certainly had this as well, where there's so much available online now, like it's almost making the trips to the archives unnecessary or just very highly specialized cases where you have to go because they haven't digitized those yet.
And they know that, the archives. So
interesting.
Part of my the frustration that I had in going to so Imperial War Museum, great archive. They have like everything. So it's the paradise of the First World War Britain studies.
Everything you need.
Yeah, everything is there. Most of the stuff is there, and most of the juicy stuff is there. They remake the museum and they did a good job. I mean, I'm a nostalgic. I like the past because I'm a historian, so I like the old Imperial War Museum. But I actually think that they renovated in a way that is much more on the time. So I saw like tons of classes going there, tons of kids, young people, young tourists going there because it's not anymore the dusty collection of objects that was kind of cool for me. But it teaches a lot. There is a lot of like media, you know, the kind of cool stuff. But in general, it's also kind of grim. Before it was very imperial. Now, you know. Now it's a lot of concrete. It's a little brutalist, so you probably will like it.
I love the brutalism.
Yeah.
But so that's interesting. I mean, that's like something that a lot of public historians are dealing with every day. Is like, how do we, you know, keep attracting people to history without selling our souls and without having a ton of money? But it sounds like the Imperial War Museum is at least somewhat well funded.
So, yes and no, in the meaning that in the past 10 years or more, Great Britain basically did the cutting on public funding, anything that the United States is doing in the past 20 years. Right. And they are starting to feel direly the thing. So, yes, they have money because it's a big institution. But I don't think that they have the leeway that they had before.
But this new model is attracting people.
Yes, it's attracting people as a museum. They also have a very cool. They have a two twins room. One that is like for research room, and the other is like for the general public that wants to interact without appointment with archivists.
That's pretty cool.
It's very cool. So,
like, see if your grandfather was in the
Yes.
great-grandfather was in the trenches.
Yes.
Show me what you got.
yeah, but you can't directly ask for documents. So you talk, and you can talk directly with the archivist, and obviously the archivists at the Imperial War Museum are all very competent and also enthusiastic, I will say. And they tell you, oh yes, to find out about your grandparents, you have to go to the website and do this research. And when you find something, you come here, we make the appointment, and then you enter in the research room where we give you the documents. So basically, their policy changed from being a dusty old museum that was beloved by historians to a new museum that actually, for them, the last customer is the historian. The one that they care less is the researchers. And that came out. I mean, I talked a little bit with the archivist, and obviously I'm not making names because
lest you get uninvited.
Yeah, and I mean, again, like the archivists there are what they saved my month.
Okay.
So I will do whatever is in my power to defend them.
Right. They're working in their own constraints.
And I mean, again, the Imperial War Museum, if you look at it as a general like knowledge treasure, it's probably doing the best job for its survival and for like fitting in the new kind of society that we have. The problem is that we as researchers are the one that got the short stick.
Well, but that sucks as a researcher, but
yes, it sucks a lot.
Yeah, but at the same time, like how like with enrollments down, like people enrolling less in history courses, and like I think you have to attract it's kind of like the Ancestry.com thing where like in those DNA tests, that are flashy and they put you on whatever, and those have their own problems, like telling someone, they're 75% Irish or whatever. And it's all, fuzzy wuzzy stuff. It's not great stuff, but at the same time, it gets people like interested in the past.
I totally agree. And I have a troublesome relationship with the thinking of like about the museum, because part of me it's really like, oh yeah, that's very cool. The other side, and that's the researcher, is that history is made by researchers. In the meaning that memory is made by a society, but there are a lot of troubles. So, for example, it's very impermeable, the barrier between memory and research. So if you are not part of an academic institution, you can't access all those documents.
Right.
So you have to pay. So there are like a lot of troubles. But however you see it, the interpretation of the past, the new interpretation of the past, so the evolution of the interpretation of the past. Moreover, if you talk about something that's technical like the First World War, is coming from researchers. And like, I don't know, if you want to talk about women in the First World War and nobody did the actual research, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
So, and that's a big problem, because a lot of this research actually stems out from us, the PhD students, in the meaning that when you are an established historian, sure, you write like very important stuff, but most of the ideas that you grew up with as a PhD are the ones that are the foundation of your thinking, no?
Yeah.
And I think that the Imperial War Museum will be not hospitable to PhD historians at all.
Interesting.
Because, like, for example, their financial department decided that to take pictures of the documents, you have to spend £10 a day.
So it costs you £10 to take a picture of a document, which is like When you go to an archive,
so it's not one.
Yeah, but when you go to an archive, you're flipping through hundreds of documents. Maybe it depends on what you're doing, but like, I mean, I have folders and folders of images, and thankfully, all the archives I've been to, you know, have said take pictures. You know, go for it. And it also changes so where I can just go to an archive and take 3,000 pictures, and then I don't have to go to the archive again.
Yeah.
And so they're charging you to do that. And
yes, because their first customers are basically people the occasional researcer, like the guy that wants to understand what happened to his grandfather. And in that case, I totally understand that you can do that because you're really providing a service.
Yeah.
The thing is that with PhD students, you risk to kill research. You risk to push the PhD students to go elsewhere to find stuff. So to cut out a big bunch of documents, because we are talking about like a serious slice of the documents of the history of England. Moreover, if you're talking about war in the 20th century, it's all there.
Yeah.
So
then
it's a problem.
Yeah, and there's also, I've always seen it as like, if I'm going to your archive and then I'm going to put your documents into my paper and cite your archive, like I'm doing you a service.
Yeah. That's the other
more
side
researchers are going to come to your archive. More people are going to know that you exist.
And don't get me wrong, that's not my idea. You sent me the email with in the past that the harbinger of the bad news. There was this basically open letter of like more than 100 famous historians saying this thing is not functioning. It can't function. Moreover, because and you know about that, but our how to say who is like listeners?
Listeners.
Yes, our listeners don't know about
all
that.
over the world too.
Yeah,
I mean, we have the British listeners who could go down to the Imperial War Museum.
Yeah. So they changed their policy for acquiring the documents.
Mm-hmm.
So not them acquiring for you to ask about the document.
Right.
So what they did is that they are clearly having some problem in like maintaining paper documents. So they are moving a lot of those documents to outside of London to a state-of-the-art facility.
Off-site storage.
And that's a problem.
It's a huge problem.
It's a huge problem because you need 5 work days. Right. So it could be a week.
Or longer.
Yes. And you don't have a detailed description of the document. You have the description that the archivist had, the description that always have been like that. You don't have like some kind of pictures or like a picture of the folders.
Right.
So it can be that from the title is something that you really think that's very cool, and then it comes out a single leaflet on something that you don't care.
Well, because it's unmarked, uncatalogued. They just say it's a folder or whatever.
And you have a max of 10 documents a day.
Yeah.
So the whole combination is that you can literally enter in the thing with documents that you asked a week before, find out that there are basically 50 pages of stuff when you expected 500.
Yeah.
Take 50 pictures, pay £10, and in an hour you're out because there is nothing more to do for you in that day.
Exactly. And you just gotta, and you have to be so prepared. And one of the things I was thinking as I was going for my morning flaneur, walking around, and I was thinking about the sort of sacrifice you have to make just to get to the archive. So sometimes if you prepare well enough, you can get a travel grant, a small travel grant. Most of the time, the travel grant is money that comes to you after you've already completed the travel. So you have to have either put it on credit or have saved up money to go. So you're already kind of gambling on yourself. You're not getting paid to go research. Then you go and research, and especially with a system like this, you don't know what you're going to find. And each wall is so significant and challenging to someone who's basically putting their livelihood on the line, and it's becoming more difficult.
Yeah. So can we talk about money freely?
Absolutely.
Here? Okay.
Yeah.
So just to the non-PhD listener here.
Yeah. Or people who want to be a PhD.
At Temple we have how much? Is 17 grand a year, 17,500,
which is below the poverty minimum wage.
Then let's add like the health insurance. It's another problem because as soon as you are not alone, then you pay for that too. It's not free.
It's also not very good.
Yes, not very good, but so you have let's say that you are from an Ivy League and you have like 25 grand.
Right. Still below the poverty.
Yeah, still below the poverty, but like you have coming from Harvard. So it's a lot of money for a PhD.
And you got a really sexy email address.
Yes. And probably you have grants too, but let's say that you have the same grants that I had, $2,000 to go and research. It was amazing. I was very, very happy about that.
Yeah.
I calculated it took me like 5 grand to go to London
easily.
And take the thing.
So expensive to live there?
And and it's like I had to spend tons of money in Airbnb because it's a month, 35 days, tickets, and I was very lucky that I had a lot of points on the tickets, so I took the tickets for free, but it's not for free because then
you paid for the...
Yeah, and I will not use those points when I want to go to Italy with my family.
Yeah.
So it's money that I lost in a way or another. Food. And then you add 500 pounds to take pictures.
Yeah. Oh, gosh, because you're taking pictures every day for 4 or 5 weeks.
So basically it costed me almost a third of my income.
Yeah.
It could be a fifth of your income, but let's say that you have $70,000 income because like you have a decent job.
Yeah.
How much is a fifth of that? It's a car.
I know. Yeah. Or, I mean, it's...
a small car, but it's still a car. So it's a lot of money. And
now you understand why I chose Cuba.
Yeah. It was cheaper,
It was so cheap.
You can always swim to Cuba.
I was thinking about it. And... in Cuba, so I had the same sort of thing. I timed it with a conference. So I was going there for conference and research. Mm-hmm. So that allowed me to get a travel grant for the conference. But of course, the money comes later. And, so you have to plan it so carefully.
I didn't yet receive the $2,000.
Oh, you haven't gotten it yet?
No, I have to go. And I'm lucky because I'm married and my wife has a decent income.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much...
We don't have debt. So.
I know. But yeah, so in the case of Cuba, I mean, I was staying at hostels like, I mean, the cheapest hostels I could find for like $5. And that's great. Like, I that's just something I like doing. But at the same time, there's something like that's kind of perverse about it. Like I'm going to the National Archive of Cuba, and I'm like writing a history that hasn't been talked about. And, I teach at a college and stuff. And here I am, chilling at a hostel.
You're supposed to suffer.
Right. There is this sort of like, and all the, I'm not looking for sympathy, because I chose this. I had a great job teaching in New York City, and I was making, like, teachers in New York City get paid pretty well nationally. I mean, New York's too expensive to live anyway. So, like, I understand everyone's struggling, and I chose to do history, but that sort of, well, you made that decision and now suffer, or the other one is sort of like, well, I suffered when I was a PhD student. We get a lot of that, and it's really negative, sort of like...
thank you. And you also find a job after, so I'm not pitying you either. So please shut up and don't treat me like from
But then you look at the university regulations, and so if you're an admin or even a professor, and you're taking an over 6-hour flight, they'll bump you up to like business class. Like the spending for established folk at the university is just absolutely extraordinary. The per diem for Havana is $120. So if a university, say, president goes to Havana, this is not going to happen because of our current political situation, but if a president of a university went to Havana, their per diem would be $120 or whatever. You know, I made $120 last like 3 weeks in Havana. Or, you know, like it's just...
So only with the per diem, I would probably pay almost all my London thing. And most likely the per diem is only food and stuff and not even like...
Exactly.
Staying somewhere.
That's crazy. So you really have to be creative. Like, I wouldn't discourage anyone from doing it. And like, you know, I certainly do enjoy what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I really enjoy...
But you need to know where you are like jumping in, what kind of lion den you're jumping in.
And you should also be careful or like selective about what you choose to research.
Yes.
So like you could today write a really good dissertation on totally online source material. I believe that. That's
basically what I aim to. I'm kind of old. I mean, I'm for a PhD student, I'm 38 years old. That's my fourth year of the PhD.
Yeah.
But I started when I was 35. So so my aim from the get-go was to take a PhD before that I get 40 years old, because it's old to start your career,
you know.
So, and for a lot of reasons, I'm Italian, I moved here, I lost a lot of time for immigration. That will be a totally another podcast, because a lot of Americans will could totally learn how difficult it is, even if you're like the luckiest one like me, to enter in this country as a non-illegal. And as an illegal, it's obviously worse. But the thing is that I have to be very, very fast. So being very, very fast means that I have to choose the most efficient path. And the most efficient path for me was that, for example, I collected as much as I could from the first year. That I entered already with kind of an idea of what I wanted to research. And I started to refine my idea in the past 3 years. So the actual difference is that a lot of when I wrote my my prospectus for the thesis, it took me 1 week.
Yeah, because you already knew what you wanted to do. You had your material, and that's sort of like when you apply. Even getting in anywhere to any PhD program is an achievement. Like it's
10%.
Yeah, 10%. And so when I got the news from Temple, I was so excited because I knew I wanted to study the Quakers, the American Friends Service Committee, and the archive is here in Philadelphia. And like,
oh, you lucky bastard!
Exactly. So I knew even if I had been in New York, and you know but if I had gone to one of those universities in New York that I applied to, that would have been its significant trip down to Philadelphia to look at the archive. And then where are you going to find the money for that living in New York City? And so like that, just having the archive here, and I've not been, I don't go every day, but just having it there is a huge deal.
Yeah. And the reality is that archive work is not one-day work.
Never, no way.
You can do it with one-day trips, but it's extremely painful, and also I suppose even more expensive, because you have to add the ticket, you have to add the time. So if you have to spend like 6 hours in the archive, let's say like this, and then you have to wake up at like 4 a.m. for you is not a problem because you are an early bird, but for me, 4 a.m. is basically in the middle of the night, as for the vast majority of the normal people.
Most humans are this way, yes, I've come to realize.
And take like the train to be at 8 o'clock or like 9 o'clock. The Imperial War Museum was 10 o'clock.
Yeah. Oh.
From 10 to 6.
Those are the hours.
Yes. Yeah. So you have less hours, less days, because it's from Monday to Thursday. So Friday is off too. So less time, And you have the money that you have to spend on pictures. You can't have a stand for your camera.
Yeah.
So you only handheld cameras, and like it was very painful because if you're taking pictures all day long, eventually your wrist is like literally sore. And I saw like all the historians that they say I can't take pictures because they were shaking with the hands.
Yeah.
What do you do? I mean, you should allow, at least for medical reasons, people to have like a stand. Moreover, because you're paying £10 to take those pictures, but you can't.
So
a lot of rules seem to be constructed to deter.
Each archive has. I did some master research at the friend's house in London, and they had no computer rule. Yes, and no pens. You just get pencil and notebook, and like. I mean, that's like crazy. Maybe they had allowed computers. They didn't allow pictures for sure. And like, the hours were 10 to 4. It was like really tough hours. And I would get there at like 9:30 and they would like laugh at me because I'd just be sitting there outside and they're like, wow, you're keen like to get started. I'm like, this is the one shot I have. I mean, like I'm not coming back. And so I would just stay and I wouldn't even take a lunch break. I would go 10 to 4 and then I would be absolutely exhausted.
You have to take a lunch break at Imperial War Museum because there is an hour lunch break in between. So you actually have only 5 hours.
They make you leave.
Yeah. Because there is and I mean, I don't disagree with these rules because those poor archivists.
Oh, I know, yeah.
They need a lunch break. Why should someone be? The problem is that, okay, so give me more time, give me the Friday, or like give me some kind of freedom that doesn't let me think that I'm actually not welcome here.
Right.
I mean, yes, I agree, you are providing a service to me, but as we were saying, I'm providing a service to you too, because all my research that I'm doing then eventually will lead to more stuff. So if you value your archive as an archive, you have to kind of help the users of the archives that are not simply, oh yeah, my grandpa.
Yeah, and it's cool too when you get like, I did some research and I'm going to be back at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum and they have
in DC?
In DC, yeah, and they just have the best archivists. And you know, this is consistent with archivists are great people 99.9% of the time. And but especially when they have to work, when they have a product they're also selling. So when they have to work with like just the armchair, the Sunday historians, they just light up when they talk to someone who's like working on something new or different, and they get so excited and they're so helpful. And a lot of times they will make or break your research. Like they can show you stuff that you had no idea existed.
So on this, I have like a funny episode because I'm studying what is called the SS or CDS. That is not the SS, the German guys.
Yeah.
But is the Stationary Service Corps. Basically, the army had a printing division that brought actually printers in France, and they were like doing millions of prints a month.
Uh-huh.
And that was I was interested because basically those prints went back to the soldiers, and they were the how do I say? Basically, they say distillation. Yeah, the distillation.
Distribution.
But they were like distilling like a liquor all the knowledge of the front line.
Yeah.
And give it back to the troops in a clean and more accessible way.
Wow, like aggregating knowledge.
Yeah. So basically, it looks like the government is telling to the troops what to do, but actually, what my research is trying to demonstrate is that actually, were the soldiers telling the government what to say, and the government then was distributing the government, war office, and
they were getting the insights and sending them out.
Yes, so all these pamphlets are in the Imperial War Museum. And some historians already like researched about that, not more than a single chapter, so nothing like big.
So that's the first thing a historian does is like, has anyone else written about
yes,
it? And then
yes.
at that moment, either you die inside or you keep running.
And I mean, I'm confident that I am bringing something new because I see that a lot of errors, even from big historians, now like they focused on of 2 of them, and they made hundreds of these things. And there is one document that has been downloaded like tons of time. It's from this historian, I think in University of Glasgow, if I remember well, that he put online his list of this pamphlet. And it's 1/10 of the actual list that I found out at the
museum.
So the thing is that the Imperial War Museum had a private documents for the archivists only.
Yeah.
With all the list of SS pamphlet that they have there, that they could find. And eventually this like angel archivist came to me and say, are you interested in this? Because you are asking for all these documents. I say, oh!
And you get your list and you are...
And I took like, I basically transformed that in an Excel document, not by hand. With we can talk about how the technique but that I use. But basically now I have all the complete list of the Imperial War Museum. That it's almost complete. Almost everything is there. And you can't download this tool.
Yeah, it's not available to anyone.
So they have this website that is made in a way that doesn't allow you to browse, for example, the document. You can only search by word. Every single document is kind of indicized I still have to understand how. So if you ask for S.S. that is the stationary service, you miss tons of these documents because they are not indicized with SS, but they are indicized only with the title.
Yeah.
And you can't go deep in they don't offer an advanced research for looking for stuff. They are not indicized on the content. And that's something that gave me troubles also when I was researching for an article on maps, because I was looking for the oral interviews that were talking about something, and I knew that some specific oral interview were talking about that and had in the description of the interview that specific term, and they weren't popping out in my research.
Yeah.
So I was like, how do you search something like that? And then you don't have on the website all these tools that will be, even only the list with the titles could be good for research.
Right. Yeah, so, for some reason that's kept behind closed doors.
You can't jump on the train of changing everything without thinking about this stuff.
Yeah.
Because you are literally putting the direction of new research.
Well, that's sort of what I wanted to talk about next is how are these things going to change history or change the production of history? So if you only do research on what's available online, how much are you missing? Is this any different from creating boundaries, you know what I'm saying? So people are going to start researching and writing about what's available online.
So what I feel, and that's my personal feeling totally, is that the future is research on a lot of documents that before have been overlooked totally. I don't know, I used a lot of English review articles.
Yeah.
That nobody read before to talk about the First World War.
I see.
Magazines and this kind of stuff.
So you think that's the next area?
I think that people will start to use them because they're free and online. So you can download them. And I mean, if you can, I'm kind of lucky because the copyright system started from 1923, if I remember well.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think it's...
So everything...
1929 becomes uncopyrighted next year, I think, or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a big
but
one.
A lot of like stuff online is still like locked on 1923. I don't think that they are like unlocking
it's a
stuff.
slow release.
Yeah. So, but lucky enough for me, 1923 is perfect for me because I don't care about anything afterwards.
Well, World War I's a really nice kind of. It's nice in some ways, but you don't get like. I get it. I'm just at the end with World War II, the end of sort of like oral history and talking to people, which so I can borrow and hang with anthropologists, which is awesome.
Sure.
And so that changes my sort of research significantly. Whereas World War I's kind of outside of that range.
They're all dead now.
They're all dead.
I think that
what was he, Harry Patch? He was like 14 when he joined the military, lied about his age, and he just died a couple of years ago.
Yeah, that he was the last.
He was the last survivor. Only the ones who lied about it, who were children, basically survived that long. Yeah, so that eliminates like oral histories. I guess you could talk to people who knew their grandparents or whatever.
Not really, because first of all, it becomes like a conversation of memory. Not on facts.
Yeah.
In the meaning that, I mean, even with oral history, it's on memory, but you can interact with the memory directly. So you can go there and say, what was your relationship with rats in the trenches?
Yeah.
And then it lights up and it say, oh, obviously it was terrible for this reason, this reason, this reason, and this reason. So it sees memory, but you are talking with the archive.
Right.
Instead, if you talk with the nephew that was talking about that, you can only talk about the stuff that the grandparent was telling him.
And then he says, Grandpa never talked about rats.
So, I mean, an example that I'm pretty sure that will totally disappear is that I was writing a chapter of the thesis like these days, and there is this memory of a guy that was with a friend, and the friend got killed by a sniper. Just because the friend was using glasses, field glasses, and he was not. So the friend was an officer, and he got killed, basically. And the guy started to cry on the microphone because those are very still raw, emotional stuff that they most likely buried down for like 50, 60 years, and they wouldn't go and touch them again because they're very painful. So I don't feel that with the grandkids, this guy would have said, I was like in the trenches with this officer that was also a friend, and he got killed in front of me and like simply dropped in my arms.
Absolutely.
So those will be lost totally.
Yeah.
And I have to thank the Imperial War Museum again, because they did like professional interviewers went there and like recorded the memories of these soldiers, and I can use them now.
Yeah, that's so important. Keeping that, and certainly the Holocaust, the HoH Foundation did a lot of videos for that. So there's like tons of video memories that people can sort of access, which is really great for people who are, just starting out, or like there's so many awesome online resources where you can start to get these. So I guess all hope is not lost.
No, I found like the other day a memory of a guy online, and most likely this book has been published on, 1,000 books.
Yeah.
Well, this kind of small books that had a very small market. But thank God now they digitize them and they put them online, so to preserve them, because if not, they will totally disappear as another book that I search everywhere and nobody has, not even the Imperial War Museum.
So do you use Google Books a lot, or what do you use? Like archive.org?
Archive.org is the biggest one for me.
And they have a lot of like out of copyright books that are right. Okay.
Yeah, and they have like a bunch of university that participate to the thing to this project.
So like Brown University will scan a book and send it to archive.org.
Yeah, one of the most prolific one that's really helped me a lot for the First World War. Most likely they have like plenty of data on that. Is the Toronto University.
digitizing a lot of stuff.
Yeah, they put like tons of stuff, but you can also find UCLA, Stanford, all the big. Obviously, you need a lot of money to digitize the thing, but the problem is that, for example, the Imperial War Museum is spending tons of money to safeguard the paper.
Right,
but
they're kind of against the digitization. So that's kind of like the next thing is like, why then does it even matter the qualifications of a historian when someone who maybe has a regular job and on Saturday and Sunday they go home and they're at archive.org writing their own history? Like, does the qualification matter anymore then?
So there are two things that matters. The first is time, in the meaning that the historian is a professional guy. So you can be a passionate woodworker that makes one chair a year. That is amazing.
Right. Really good chair.
You're not making chairs for the world, though.
Yeah.
It's your passion, and that the chair could go in a museum and everyone would be happy to admire that chair. But at the same time, like, people that need chair to, for every day can go on.
So is it a matter
chair.
of production then?
It's a matter of time, in the meaning that some productions you can't do them if you don't have enough time. So for a chair it's okay, but if you need to remake an entire street of houses and you are alone, it takes a lifetime.
Yeah.
And perhaps not even enough time. If instead, like, you have a team of people that works there 24/7, in 2 weeks it's done. No, so it's very similar, because to do the research that I need to do here, like, it takes like most likely a couple of years.
Yeah.
A full-time job. I mean, it's not full-time job because we teach too, but at the same time,
that's like plus.
It's part of our job.
Yeah.
If it is not part of your job, when do you do this? In the night?
Right.
How do you constantly think about that? I mean, how many passionate people can afford to simply don't think about their work and think during work hours about what to write?
Right. And this is sort of my problem with, like, especially, I used to use Vox and the videos that Vox puts out on YouTube as a resource a lot of times when I'm teaching, because their graphic designer has got to be like one of the best in the world.
Yeah.
But recently, like, it's becoming more and more clear that they're just, because they get like 4 or 5 million hits like within day one, so they're just putting stuff out every day, and the quality has dropped significantly. Like, where the people writing the videos now, it's clear they've just read like 1 or 2 articles about China, and now they're going to put out a video on how China has crazy cybersecurity without
citing the article.
Without citing the article, without citing even where the information is coming from, and also like you're saying, there's no actual deep thought that's happening. Well, like they're not contextualizing China in any way. They're not, they're just presenting. It's basically like news vomit kind of history. It's just sort of nonsense.
And and also we are trained to think critically.
Mm-hmm.
That if you have not been trained to do that, it's very easy to slip in a mistake that could be like
significant.
Significant, yes. It's easy enough for a trained historian to slip in a mistake.
Right.
For a non-trained historian, it becomes like almost, I don't know. As a military historian, I remember a friend that came to me, and there's people that reads even books that said, "Oh, everyone knows that the Russian army, they only had 1 rifle every 2 people." And I told him, like, that's a lie. It's not true.
It's just not right.
It's just not right. They had plenty of stuff, and they have plenty of people too, and they used a lot of them because they didn't care about life. But they were a good army. They were the one that won the war, not the United States, or like England. And he was saying, but now what? And he was like all riling up against me. And I was like, look, you can't simply use the enemy at the gates as because that's most likely where he took the idea.
Yeah.
And the thing is that I can understand that's wrong, because I didn't read a single article. I read multiple books on the army, and I'm inside a ring of people that like keep saying, "Oh, did you read the last article on that thing? It like totally destroyed what we thought about like how like the Germans were fighting the Russians." No, so you read it, and you can also critically assess if the article convinced you or not, because it brings you all the documents, it brings you a thesis and all this kind of stuff. So we are trained to do that all the time.
And I also think people aren't, or at least aren't thinking about how much of this conversation happens. Like, even when I went to Cuba, you know, one of the historians at the University of Havana who studied Jews herself sat down with me for like 2 hours. You know, they're enormously generous with their time, and we just compared notes basically. And
that's why it's easy for you to make podcasts.
Yeah, no, it's true. We spend a lot of time like upset, and I don't think that plays out, and it doesn't work in like sort of the Twitter world, you know, because Twitter's all about production and going fast, and you know, but that's not what history is. History is like slow food of you know, the past.
So if you're not a PhD listener, you should know that, for example, when we have class at the same time and our office is nearby, we end up like talking about history, critical thinking, China, like the United States situation, but always with an historical perspective, because that's what we like to do. We like to think and like critically assess complicated matters.
Right.
And the more people are in the conversation, the more like people with knowledge are in the conversation, the more we are like thirsty about them. So if we are talking about the problems of race in the United States, we go to a good friend of ours like Menica that has that is studying it, because we are not the specialist. And actually, most likely, even if I'm Italian, I know more about race than the average American, no? But we have this attitude of like, go to the experts and talk about complex stuff.
Which I think a lot is certainly like lost. I mean, it's kind of, unfortunately, it is lost on a lot of people now. So, yes, so that's a good note, I think, to end on for this hour of discussion. I mean, there's so much more here. We're going to have to talk because, Andrea, you do such cool stuff with like computers and digitizing notes and things like that. And
we can talk about that.
Teaching, we're going to have to get back together and talk about it. But for this hour now, we're going to end with our typical suggestion, where we give one suggestion to the world. Doesn't have to be related to history, so take it away.
So this is actually related to history for me, because it's a manga. It's like a Japanese comic book. It's comic novel from Fumio Kouno, and the title is "In This Corner of the World." Obviously, that's the translated title. And it's, if you want to know about Japan. Experience of the population of Japan under the bombing of the United States during the Second World War, you can read this. It takes like 4 nights, 4 evenings to read it. It's very enjoyable, and is full of thought and like care. So it's something that I will totally suggest. And if you don't have the time to buy the book, the comic, and they made a video, a movie about that.
That's excellent.
It's the same title, "In This Corner of the World." So if I'll ever have the occasion, I'll use it in class as a teaching thing. Yeah, and be sure to check that out. We list these recommendations at hourofhistory.com/rex. And we'll give you a link straight to Amazon where you can buy or rent the movie probably on Amazon. Excellent. So my suggestion this week is going to be something that came up in our conversation, and I think everyone should just go and waste like a couple hours. It's like when you get on YouTube, you know, and then like 4 hours later, you're like, wow, how did I do that?
My suggestion is archive.org.
Oh yeah.
Which is like
The rabbit hole of the past.
I know. It is just a rabbit hole of the past. The other day, and I wrote about it, so I'll also post this on the hourofhistory.com blog. But I was just looking for like flaneurs, the people who just walk around aimlessly. It used to be like a bougie thing that they did in France. But anyway, I found a book that is just describing walks through Philadelphia in the early 1900s. And so I'm reading about these people walking through Fishtown, where I live now, and talking about everyone's speaking German and like, or Kensington, you know, and I mean, it was still like working class immigrant neighborhood and just absolutely fantastic sort of reading. And all these books, there are hundreds of thousands, millions probably.
Free.
Totally digitized, totally free, and very easy. And you can like download them to your Kindle. You can download them to any system, to your mobile. So check it out, archive.org. Well, it's been a pleasure, Andrea.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're going to have to do a follow-up on this for sure. And hopefully we didn't discourage anyone too much from pursuing a PhD.
We are both doing so. We both love it.
And we're very happy, yes.
Oh, yeah. We talk about that for hours.
Hours a day. No, that's no lie. But anyway, on Hour of History, it's our world, anytime, any place. Thanks for listening.